convention is the same, so I'm not confused about what I'm expected to do. The same is true here. So for example, view cart and checkout and continue shopping follow a similar convention, although they've prioritized using color. So the convention can vary based on what the priority item is, but the convention other than that is the same throughout. In some instances, if you are using a third-party tool, you can use the third-party tool, say a Google Analytics, to determine how successful you are. And what I recommend, if possible, and not everybody has the ability to do it, but in some instances you are able, or your staff, your internal design team or what have you, may be able to create two versions of a page, and they call that A/B testing. And what you do essentially is create two versions of an identical page, the difference between them being where you place the call to action. So for example, if I want to say apply online now, and I'm not sure whether that would work best over on the right-hand side of the screen on the bottom or on the left at the top, depending on the design, you may produce two versions of a page and then test them out. And look at your Google Analytics or whatever analytics you use to determine where the most clicks are coming from and what the conversion rates are. So how many successful applicants you actually get from having it on the left versus having it on the right. And they just refer to that as A/B testing because you're testing a scenario A versus a scenario B. So Google Analytics or other third-party tools are really helpful in terms of refining your strategy over time with respect to your calls to action to see what's working and what's not. While there are some general rules, for example, people on the web read from left down, back up, back down, back up, back down. So that would say, well, you want to put all of your calls to action on the right. The fact is that for different types of sites, there are different conventions. So for example, in the case of a shopping cart, oftentimes the convention is to have a pop-up with the product and then have calls to action on the right. Many other sites tend to have calls to action over on the lower right. So depending on the convention, I would say for institutions of higher education, calls to action often are on the lower right, although that's not a universal. Again, it depends on the design of your site. So if there's a lot going on in the upper left, the lower right may have a white space available. By the same token, if the lower right space is very busy and there's room on the upper right, then certainly consider using that, and then consider doing some A/B testing. A/B testing also doesn't have to be done online. You can also do A/B testing with paper prototypes, so just have pictures and to do some informal testing to see which people find easier to see and more compelling. Another rule of thumb for calls to action is make sure they're persistent. Now that doesn't mean on every single page. That means on every page in which that call to action is relevant. So it may very well be on your site that on every page you would have apply now for prospective students. I would say, for example, an exception to that might be if you have an alumni section, you clearly would not want the alumni to apply online, or they would think you are a whack job. So, so again, contextually sensible. You want it to be persistent in every case in which it applies to the user or to the particular audience. Again, I think to think of calls to actions as part of task completion. So when users come to your site, they are looking for information or they're looking to do something or transact something. If you think of it in that context, then what you would realize is things like if I am a prospective student on a higher ed site and I am looking at campus life, I may very well say, you know, this campus life looks so great, I'm going to apply now. And what you don't want to do is make that student search around for that call to action. You want that call to action to be there where it's relevant. And if there are other similar sections through your site that may be convincing brand points or big selling points or unique differentiators for you, then you would certainly want calls to action like apply online to be available in that context. The other thing to consider for those of you who are using some kind of third-party analytics tool, I think many people are using Google Analytics. A lot of these packages have a site overlay tool, and that enables you to actually see where clicks are being made on a specific page. It's actually, in the case of Google Analytics, a copy of the actual site page, but over every single place where it's clickable, there will be some kind of number or percentage that'll represent either a number of clicks or a percentage of, out of all the people who took action on this page, X% clicked on this button or this link. And again, once you have a good sampling of data, as with A/B testing, you can make adjustments accordingly to kind of improve the flow of your funnel and improve your conversion rate. So let's take a look at another example. So we've got iFactory. Oh, look, it happens to be an iFactory page. Purely coincidence. So here's a good example of call to action with lots of white space, a very clear design convention, and some fairly simple wording. Connect with us at the conference, and it's a specific conference that's well known in the publishing industry. Again, you click here, and the call to action takes you to another very simple form. In this case, what you want to make sure of is that if your call to action is clear, that the rest of the path is also clear and simple. Because obviously, if I took the user to a very complicated form, then I may very well be raising the stakes for the abandonment rate. Again, it's too confusing, and so I can't be bothered. Or for that matter, they're asking me for too much information. I'm just going to close this and go to some other site. And you lose not only necessarily a prospective student, but you lose data about who's visiting your site, which is really invaluable. So I'm going to look at one other example. Register now. And the reason I brought this one up is because, again, it goes back to the issue of collecting data about who's visiting your site and why. This site is a site for people living with pain. It's a healthcare site. But what I love about this is you could not be more obvious in terms of what they want you to do. They are pushing people to register. And essentially, by registering, it allows you to get access to more content than you would be if you didn't register. And it also just so happens that by registering, there are other features and functions that you have available to you that you wouldn't otherwise. The other thing that I love about it is they have done something clever and used a very unusual Twitter format for the call to action to follow them on Twitter. That's because this particular kind of site happens to benefit greatly from social networking. It's the kind of site where people in pain come to get information about living with pain, and if they found it helpful, this company has found that Twitter has been a great conversion funnel for them. So they are making every effort to get people on Twitter talking about this site, and needless to say, they've done a really excellent job of putting Twitter in an unusual place, may I add. Usually the convention is on the lower right. So in this case, they've decided to buck the convention, which I think was very effective. They also used, again, an unusual icon. So as you can see,